Hey guys, it's Joe from GadgetryTech.com, and next to me I have the new BenQ EX2780Q monitor. It is a 1440p 144Hz IPS monitor. Great for gaming, has great color and contrast. Static contrast ratio is 1001, HDR10 and HDR400 support, which is VESA certification. It's on the lower end for the VESA's HDR support, but again, for the money, it still has it, which is excellent. We'll discuss how that stacks up against competitors. This has FreeSync certification. It doesn't have the G-Sync certification. However, when you're using DisplayPort, you can enable G-Sync on the control panel, and I didn't notice any artifacts or tearing. So even though it doesn't say G-Sync, it kind of works. Take that for what you will. So talking about the basics, we mentioned the display specs. It has one DisplayPort 1.4, version 1.4, two HDMI 2.0 ports, a USB-C DisplayPort with PD10, which is awesome because if you have a phone like I do, I have the Samsung Galaxy, which has USB-C. This comes with a USB-C cable in the box. I can plug in a single cable to the monitor, and then all of a sudden the monitor is mirroring my phone, and I have the Samsung DeX working. No problem at all. I don't have to buy any special adapters or anything like that. Love that feature. I think that's often overlooked in today's market, but some people really do need that. The BenQ has that. So this is looking to be a jack of all trades. We're going to get into that in a moment, but there's a few things about this monitor that stand out. It has the DCI P3 color gamut rating of 95%, which is excellent. For those comparing to older monitors, sRGB of 100% was like the common thing. This has sRGB 100, but DCI P3 is kind of like a new color range or gamut that it's better suited towards color saturation and requirements necessary for proper HDR. So before we really dive into that, I just want to warn you, some of this stuff is going to get very technical. I'll save it for the end of the review because there's been some misconceptions about this monitor that I've seen in other reviews done on this, and from comments of people thinking this monitor has or does things that it does not. And I want to clear that up because it's a great monitor and it's important to know everything it has. So talking about the interface and the usability of the monitor has 3 speakers in it. There's 2 up front on the sound bar here, if you will, this on the bottom. They're 2 watts each, and then there's a 5-watt woofer towards the back top of the panel. I can't stress how good the sound is enough because it's so good that it's the first monitor I've ever heard where if you're a primary headphone user but occasionally use speakers for watching a quick YouTube video or something you saw on the news or whatever it is, if you just want to hear something quick and easy, this can hold its own and sound good enough where you're not listening to a tin can. I have never heard a monitor that sounds this good, and a lot of that has to do with that design on the front and rear with the extra speaker. Cannot stress it enough. And then in addition to that, you have a volume knob on the bottom left corner of the screen. You can roll it up and down and change the volume. And what's really cool, if you bump it, it doesn't actually move much. So I can hit it really hard and see how it's staying around 10, 12, 13. It's not skyrocketing, but if I go slow and easy, it can really get up there. So I like that little attention to detail that they have with the volume knob. I think that's kind of cool. The name of the speakers on the back, or the branding behind it, is Trevolo. Hopefully I'm pronouncing that correctly, but there it is. It does make a huge difference. Another cool feature, again, attention to detail, it has a remote control. Now this remote control does everything that the buttons on the back of the monitor has, which on the back is kind of like a basic ring for navigation and a couple shortcut keys, which you can assign your own custom settings to if you want to make that a quick setting for HDR, whatever it may be. But on the remote, you have HDRI settings, you have your blue light reduction, which has several modes to reduce blue light and make it look like a warmer tone. Really good for eye strain. You have Brightness Intelligence Plus. What that does is basically, excuse me, recovering from a cold. The little bar in the bottom of the monitor actually has ambient light sensors built into it. So it will adjust the lighting of the monitor depending on the lighting in your room, reducing eye strain and increasing visual performance. Now on the monitor, it has, when you look at the specs, it says it's a 10-bit panel. It's actually 8-bit plus FRC, which is flow rate control. What flow rate control is, it's basically called temporal dithering. And what that does is it can dynamically shift color hues with each frame to give you almost like an emulation of a larger color range. It gets kind of technical, but basically you get very close to a true 10-bit panel's capability as far as color range goes without paying for a true 10-bit panel, because those cost a lot of money. Now, obviously, there's better monitors that have true 10-bit, higher contrast ratio, etc., but you got to keep in mind, having a really good monitor that's 1440p, 144 hertz, it's hard to fit in a certain price range. So BenQ had to make some, I guess, sacrifices, if you will. It's super common. 8-bit plus FRC is, I think, the most common panel you can get on a higher end or mid-tier monitor. So I just wanted to point that out. Now, I mentioned the contrast ratio. To properly test contrast ratio, the equipment you need to measure that is very cost prohibitive, if you will. It's very expensive. I don't have the means to get all of that equipment, but I did a lot of research online and found people that measured this. And I also find a site that I got the specs to the panel itself. And anyway, so the DCI-P3 rating of 95%, which is very good, measured by PC Magazine, 94.5. That's excellent. The contrast ratio is 1,000 to 1. Measured by PC Magazine was 1,090 to 1. So the contrast ratio actually exceeded the base rating. So the monitor does perform extremely well on a picture quality standpoint. I can't stress enough that contrast ratio. It's super important and it helps. So let's talk about gaming, because that's super important. If you only have one monitor you can have on your desk, and it's for console and PC, 1440p, 144 hertz is, in my preference, a better solution to go with over 4K 60, because on Xbox, even the Xbox One X, it supports 1440p. So you get the native resolution regardless, and you'll still get a good frame rate. The 4K isn't as necessary when you're on a smaller screen like this, when you're at a 27-inch monitor. The other advantage of 1440p is on a Windows desktop environment, you can run the text scale at 100%, which means no scaling. That will be really good for editing programs like Adobe's Premiere Pro, for example, which does not do well with scaling. It makes things very blurry. So you get to run everything natively, but then you get the benefit of the 144 hertz, which, guys, if you haven't tried it before, any PC Master Race guy, any PC guy that has a 144 hertz screen that's used it will all say you will never go back. So if you're considering making the jump to your first 144 hertz monitor and you're comparing it to another one that's a 4K 60, for example, because it's 4K, go with the 144 hertz for PC, because it is freaking amazing. And I think the next gen Xbox, the Series X, I haven't heard any confirmation for PlayStation yet because they haven't released anything, but I think it will support 1440 at 120 frames per second, because they said on the press release 4K 60 guaranteed, but with certain settings for performance, it can support up to 120 frames per second. So that will help on a 144 hertz panel to benefit from the frame rate. All that means is it's a much faster refresh. You're getting 144 refreshes per second versus 60. That's over double. It looks super smooth. It's awesome. So when we look at the stand, compared to some competitors, it is a pretty basic stand. It's -5 degrees to 20 degrees. So -5, it literally just barely tilts down, but then it tilts up with that full 20, depending on your desk setup. The tilt could come in handy. It does not have any telescoping feature, so you can't raise or lower it. You also can't swivel it. You can turn it because it's not like your pedestal is bolted to the desk though, so it does rotate. It just doesn't rotate on the stand itself, rotate the entire thing. So the stand is a little bit more limited compared to some other competitors in the similar price range. There's actually less expensive monitors that have the telescoping stand, which I like. However, this does have VESA 100, so most people that buy premium monitors get some kind of desk mount or wall mount for several screens. So this is less of an issue for those guys. I do want to point that out if you are planning on using the stand. If you do use the integrated stand, there is a rubber pad that's included to put the remote on. The rubber pad is fit well within the little ring, if you will, of the pedestal. And on the back, there's a removable cover. You can pop this cover off and snake the wires in. There's some wire management inside. It's really just a couple bolts, but hey, it gets the job done, and it tucks the wires away nicely. I found if you have a lot of wires protruding out the back, that little protective cover can pop off a little bit, but it works. As long as you're not messing with it, it'll always stay there and it looks really clean. So now it's time to get technical, because there are some discrepancies on the internet as to what kind of panel BenQ is using. And everyone's like, just buy the LG because the LG is cheaper. Let's talk about that. I think the best selling IPS 1440p 144 hertz screen right now is the LG 27GL850. Rightly so, because the price is great for those specs. It's I think you can get it for about $450 if I'm not mistaken, or about $500. It has a 98% DCI P3 color range on it, which is awesome. However, the big kicker, and this is going to drive a lot of people crazy, because if you're doing anything with HDMR, here's where it gets a drawback. The LG panel is an 800:1 contrast ratio. That's kind of poor for an expensive monitor. Really 1,000:1 is kind of the minimum. It's not a drastic difference, but when you factor that in, plus I've seen perceptible light bleed, if you will, because it's an edge lit LED display. You can see when you have a full black image, there's a little bit of gray spots throughout the panel, and that's because of the way the backlighting works. The LG makes a good screen. I'm not knocking it. The panel, by the way, because I did a lot of research on this, the panel is the LM2070 WQA SSA1. That's what's in a lot of 1440p 144 hertz monitors. Like the majority of the 1440p monitors that are new are using that panel from LG. It's a great panel. There's nothing wrong with it for the money. It was a real good kick in the ass for the industry, because prior to this coming out, there weren't a lot of good options for good quality picture while still having IPS and high refresh rate and everything. It tends to look like crap. So LG came along, made a kick-ass panel, great. The BenQ does not use the LG panel. The BenQ uses a panel from a company called Innolux. Innolux makes some pretty expensive panels, and they also make panels for infotainment systems for cars because of the durability and performance and extreme conditions, etc. However, important things to note with the Innolux: the first giveaway should be the contrast ratio. If you see a new 1440p 144 hertz screen that has 1,001 contrast ratio or better, it is likely to be an Innolux panel. If you see an 800:1 contrast ratio, it's likely to be the LG panel. Now on the BenQ, it uses the Innolux M270 KCJ-K7B. This panel is excellent. Again, it has almost as good a color saturation as the LG. However, it's a better contrast. Therefore, it gets the HDR 400 certification from VESA. The LG does not get the VESA 400 certification or HDR 400 certification because the contrast is too poor. So if you're doing HDR content, I think it's super important to consider that this isn't much more than the LG to get that huge boost in contrast. That's a 25% increase in contrast for a small increase in cost. Now, another thing I like about it is the USB-C. Again, with the phones, the competitors don't usually have USB-C. They have either USB 3.0 ports, like a USB-A for a hub. I don't like dangling cables from the monitor. I like to tuck everything away, so I prefer to have the temporary use to connect to a phone. Now, when you look at other monitors that use the Innolux panel, now I'm talking the exact same panel as the BenQ. Gigabyte has the Aorus monitor, the FI27Q-P. Now, the Aorus monitor is $650. Right now, this is selling for about $550. It ranges from $450 to $600, so take that for what you will. The Gigabyte is at least $50 to $100 more than the BenQ at any given point for the exact same panel. So if you're concerned about color gamut and contrast ratios, save the money and get the BenQ. And the BenQ has the USB-C display. The Gigabyte does not. It has a USB 3.0 hub. It's a single USB in, and it has two USB-As on the bottom of it, tucked behind it. It's not the most accessible, but it's there. So if you want to hook up a flash drive or something to your monitor, you can do that, but you sacrifice the USB-C. So $100 more, you lose the USB-C. However, with the Gigabyte, you do get a better stand. It has a telescoping stand. It also has full rotation if you want to use it in a vertical mode. And if you guys are obsessed with RGB and want RGB on the monitor, the Gigabyte Aorus has RGB lighting on the back. So in short, $100 difference increase for the Gigabyte, but you get the same panel, you lose USB-C, but you gain a better stand and RGB lighting. So I hope that clarifies any confusion. I think if you want an Innolux panel, this is one of the least expensive variants of the exact same panel. However, with the best sound quality I've ever heard in a monitor, the three inputs that have HDMI, which HDMI 2.0 does support 1440p at 144 hertz. However, G-Sync only works on DisplayPort, so you have to use the single DisplayPort for your computer. Save the HDMI for your console. The this is an incredible value. I'm just going to cut straight to the chase. This was sent to me for review. I always give unbiased reviews. The sound quality, the picture quality, and the value compared to its competitors for what you get for specs when you really start digging in and looking at everything is phenomenal. I hope with watching this review, and I didn't blow through the specs too fast, it helps you understand why you're paying for what you're paying for a BenQ. You're not paying a BenQ tax or anything over the LG. You are legitimately getting a better panel with USB-C and a much better sound system. So again, most headphone users, this is awesome for your secondary audio without having to ask your speakers on the desk. It makes it look really clean. Stand is limited, however, if you vase mount it, that's not a problem. And with that being said, this should be your main monitor. If you're looking at this for consideration, it literally does everything. I can't recommend it enough. I hope this review helped clear up any confusion and answer questions you have. If you still have more questions or comments below, please leave me a comment below. I'll be happy to answer them for you. Thank you guys so much for tuning in and sticking it out to the end, because this was a deep dive into the specs of this. But anyway, I hope you enjoyed it. Thank you, and I'll see you next time. Bye.